Hello, lovely people. I'm getting ready while I'm talking about my Nonfiction November TBR because I'm a tiny bit pressed for time. But that's okay. That's okay. Okay, first of all, my background is a total disaster. Like, there's just stuff everywhere. I can't deal right now. It's okay though. We're just gonna ignore it and we're gonna get through things. First things first, I am going to be using this Margarita palette. As you can see, my sweater has both pink and red on it. And this has both pink and red in it. On that note, I wasn't sure if I was ever gonna share this on this channel, but you know what, screw it, let's do it. I recently started a makeup channel. I know a lot of people comment on my makeup a lot, so I just thought for those people, if you are interested, you can go check that out. I will leave a link to it in the description box. I think one of my very first videos, my very first video was using this collection. It's not a very good video because it was my first time trying to do that type of a style, and I had some things that I didn't love with the filming and things I didn't love with the editing, but I tried. So I will leave that linked. If you are curious, you can go ahead and check it out. No pressure. I don't really care. It's just something to do. I realized I inadvertently was watching some videos while logged into that account. So there are a couple people who got told without actually being told, which is fine. Which is fine. Okay, so let's just get into this. First things first, Nonfiction November. If you don't know what Nonfiction November is, it is a reading initiative just to try and get people to read more nonfiction. To participate, all you have to do is read one nonfiction book. It is hosted by a book olive, and she has a few other co-hosts and people who run like an Instagram account and things of that nature. I will go ahead and leave all that linked so you can check that out if you so choose. There are, however, 4 prompts, and you can interpret these prompts in any way you want, which is a good thing because, boy, have I taken liberties. So let's just go ahead and hop into everything. Nothing is in order here. This desk is a mess. I really need to spend some time and just, like, clean up this room because it is an absolute disaster right now. It's not that I've been exceptionally busy and haven't gotten to it. It's that I've been exceptionally lazy and haven't gotten to it. That and it's been in transition. So since I started filming some makeup content, I now have makeup stuff all over this room. And then I also have the books all over this room. And then I moved some stuff around because I was trying to make it easier to film, and then I was trying to make it easier to find things, and then I kind of just gave up because I was overwhelmed. Okay, first things first, let's go with my TBR. As far as fiction goes, I just kind of plan on mood reading whatever fiction strikes my fancy. I'm mainly focusing on nonfiction, so that's all I'm going to be talking about in this video. So we'll get through the TBR, and then I'll go into some recommendations I have for the prompts. For each prompt, I have selected 2 different books. One is a book that Olive recommended on her favorite nonfiction list from last year. And then the other one is basically one I just chose to choose. Except for one category, I think both I selected are from that list. I can't remember. I honestly, I didn't go back and check, which was probably a mistake. Oops. But anyway, that was the basic thought process when making my selections, and because of that, we had to stretch a few of them. That's okay. First things first. The first prompt is collection. For this, I have chosen The Poisoners Handbook, Murder and the Birth of Forensic Medicine in Jazz Age New York by Deborah Blum. So I know, like, the subtitle doesn't sound much like collection, but I'm using the title, which is The Poisoner's Handbook. A handbook is typically a collection of rules or guidance or instructions. And so for that reason, I think it works for the prompt, and I'm using it. It says on the back, a fascinating jazz-age tale of chemistry and detection, poison and murder. The Poisoners Handbook is a page-turning account of a forgotten era. Yeah, that sounds like everything I could have ever wanted, so I'm making it work. My second selection for that prompt is, actually I think it probably fits better than my first selection. It is Warmly Inscribed, The New England Forger and Other Book Tales by Lawrence and Nancy Goldstone. Sorry. It's a collection of stories, a collection of bookish tales, and if that's not more perfect for me, then I don't know what is. Moving right along, the next prompt is industry. And at first, I was like, I don't think I have anything for industry. I don't think I have anything to recommend. I don't think I have anything to read for this. And then I realized I totally do. Not even that. I don't even feel like I'm stretching these prompts to fit the book. So the first one is an olive recommendation, and it literally has the word industry in the title. It is How Music Got Free, The End of an Industry, The Turn of the Century, and the Patient Zero of Piracy by Stephen Witt. I probably never would have even considered getting this book had Olive not recommended it, but she did. And as somebody who spent the bulk of her life living in a world in which music is pirated a lot, and who has in fact pirated a lot of music herself, I feel like perhaps I will enjoy reading about it. The second book here, I think a lot of the books I selected were actually from my Trash My TBR that I did. I think it actually just went up like Tuesday. It was supposed to go up last week, but I can't seem to get my life together right now, and that is what it is. But I have As I See It it's the autobiography of J. Paul Getty. If you have ever been to the Los Angeles area, you will have seen like the Getty Museum, and then there's also like I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a second property of J. Paul Getty's that has been turned into a museum. Anyway, J. Paul Getty was a titan of industry, and I think because of that, it's not even a stretch to have this book fit the industry prompt. He was a very interesting man, and not everything he did was awesome, as with most rich people. But I'm very curious to know how he saw himself within the context of his world and the culture in which he lived in. So I'm hoping that this will be illuminating and also interesting. Okay, next prompt is style. This is another one that I struggled with initially. And I think a lot of it was because I was thinking style very literally. I was thinking style to mean fashion, clothing. And then I decided, actually, that isn't the only way we use the word style. So I was able to come up with some interesting things after that. The first one I have selected is more of it has an interesting style of writing. It's actually a collection of letters. This is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hamp. This I had in my Trash My TBR, and so many people said I needed to read this. So, it is here. I am going to read this. I'm fitting this into style because it is an interesting style of, it's an interesting style for a book, I guess, because it's not written traditionally. The second one is more of a personality style, and that is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. So this one I've selected for a couple of reasons. One, Olive had it on her favorites list, and I was like, oh cool, I usually like things that Olive likes. But then, Emma, from a couple books, read it earlier this year and didn't like it at all. And I was like, oh, interesting. I usually feel the same way as Emma does about nonfiction. So now I don't really know what to do. Because, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about it, and I think that's part of the reason I wanted to read it for myself, because the spectrum I've seen goes from favorite to I despised it, and now I need to know where I fall on that. Okay, the last prompt is treatment. And treatment, I immediately thought of like several different ways that I could use this prompt to have it make sense. I went pretty literal, like, medical treatment for the books that I have chosen to put on my TBR. However, when it comes to the books that I have for recommendations, I went in a different direction. First up, I have Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande. Atul Gawande is a surgeon, and I believe this is kind of like a memoir about his time in the medical field. You know, providing treatment to people. I feel like every time I talk about the book, I have to, like, talk about it using the prompt in a sentence. I don't know why that is. It's just what I feel like I need to do. Alright, the second selection I made was The Butchering Art, Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grizzly World of Victorian Medicine by Lindsay Fitzharris. I have seen several people read and enjoy this book, and I wanted to get in on it. Okay, so those are my selections for my TBR for Nonfiction November. I'll probably end up throwing in other random things just because that's usually how this goes for me. I'm such a mood reader that, like, TBRs are just like a loose suggestion more than a hard and fast, this is what I'm reading. Okay, but for some recommendations. First things first, for collection, I have a few strange-ish things. But in my head they worked, so I hope they work enough in your head that you don't laugh at me. Okay, first I have 7 Brief Lessons on Physics by Carla Rivelli. This is a collection of lessons on physics. I love this book. First off, it's tiny. Okay, so if you're trying to look for stuff that you can get through pretty quickly, this is a thing. Second reason why I really enjoyed this book is that this is the first time that physics has ever made sense to me, and that I thought, oh, this is a subject I can understand. This is something that I can learn. And that meant a lot to me. Several of them I had to read more than once, and I had to, like, draw kind of stuff out in order to put the pieces together, because physics can be so abstract that it can get really difficult if you can't picture things in your head, which I cannot. So, this is my first recommendation. I was trying to keep my recommendations to 2 for each prompt, but I failed, so sorry. My second recommendation is a little weird. This is How to Invent Everything, A Survival Guide for the Standard Time Traveler by Ryan North. This is like, how do I want to put this? It's kind of like a collection of various instructions. It's basically how you could, if you needed to, rebuild civilization from the ground up. Not only is this an extremely funny book, I found some of the things so useful. So useful. I genuinely think that if anything happened, right? If, like, the power grid completely collapsed, if we were thrown into chaos, there are things in this book that I could use to help myself survive. So this, I just thought, it's useful, it's interesting, and my god, it was written so humorously that, like, I pretty much just tore through it. It was so good. The final one for collection, and this is, like, the last book, or the last prompt that I have, like, 3 things for, I think. I don't know. This is Word by Word by Corey Stamper. This is The Secret Life of Dictionaries. Dictionaries are a collection of words. It works. I read this last year during Nonfiction November, and it was my #1 favorite nonfiction pick of the year. And so I definitely had to recommend it. Okay, so my camera shut off at some point, and I think I figured out roughly where it shut off at. But I might be off by a little bit, so I'm doing my best here. Okay, recommendations for the industry prompt. First, I have Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. I listened to this on audiobook, and I very much recommend that method. Caitlin Doughty is so funny. Like, her sense of humor aligns with mine so well that I was just laughing so hard through most of this book. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with them. It is more or less a look at the death industry, making it a perfect recommendation for this prompt. My other recommendation is something of a stretch, but if you bear with me, I will make the connection. Okay, so I have Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen R. Godsey. This is a shorter book. It's more like an extended essay. So if you are looking for shorter works to kind of blitz through this year, this might be a good one. It takes a look at the benefits that women derived, specifically women, derived from socialism. But it also doesn't try to negate, I guess, the negatives. It completely acknowledges that things were not perfect. However, socialism did give women some unique opportunities to participate in various industries of the day. And that is how I'm connecting it back. Yeah, I got a lot out of this book. I learned a lot. I thought it was extremely interesting, and I recommend it for sure. Okay, so for style, I have two. The first, I'm using style in the sense of it is an interesting writing style. It is an interesting style of presenting a story. And that is The Unwomanly Face of War, An Oral History of Women in World War II by Svetlana Alexevic. Oh my god, I cannot say that. I try so hard, and it always comes out garbled on my tongue. So the reason this is a unique style is because it literally is an oral history. The author went and learned about these women's stories, asked them to tell her about their time in World War II. They are predominant, well, I think they're all Russian women that she talked to. And it was heartbreaking. I have never hated war more than I did while reading this book. The women were encouraged to join up. They felt they needed to protect their country. But the blatant sexism that they faced while serving, but then also after the fact when they came home, and everyone just assumed that they must have been whoring themselves out to the men, and that they were no good for marriage, and they were an embarrassment to their families. That bit was heartbreaking. But then also the fact that they wanted the women to go to war because they needed the bodies, but they didn't want to provide the women with boots and uniforms in their own sizes. They would just give them the stuff that the men wore and expect them to make do and figure it out. It was just horrifying. And then the fact that these women weren't, like, their service wasn't even acknowledged for so long, so many years. It was very impactful, and it tore me to pieces. The other book I have selected for the style prompt is What's Your Pronoun? Beyond He and She by Dennis Barron. This book looks a lot into how people style themselves, how people are styled in terms of, in terms of various laws and things of that nature. It dives into the fact that the English language has always lacked a gender-neutral pronoun, and how this not only affects people, but it affects laws and things of that nature. One of the most interesting things I learned from it was that a lot of this searching for a gender-neutral pronoun came out of the suffragist movement, because laws were all written in male form using men's pronouns. So it would be like, he can vote, he can do this, whatever. And in terms of the laws that came to like paying fines or suffering consequences, they would claim that he is a gender neutral pronoun and that he meant all humans, not just men. But then when it came time for laws about voting, they claimed that it says he and it means men. So that was like something that I found just absolutely fascinating. And I really just recommend reading this. It's just a good book. It's just interesting, and it shows that a gender-neutral pronoun is not a new concept. Okay, and the final prompt, I have recommendations for treatment. This I took in a different direction. So for my TBR, you saw I took it pretty literally in terms of medical treatment. Oops. I will fix that, but I have to let it dry first. Here, I'm taking it in a couple of different ways. So, I actually have a ton of recommendations for this. I'm going to try to narrow it down to 3 and then just mention a few more that I think were just excellent books that could fit really well for this. First, I have The Story of More, How We Got to Climate Change and Where to Go From Here by Hope Jaron. This discusses our treatment of the earth and how this human drive to constantly have more has destroyed the planet that we live on. But it's not as depressing as you might think. It's not a story of no hope. It gives ideas and things, actions you personally can take within your life, within your own home, that can make a small impact. And if, you control what you can control, and if your neighbor controls what they can control, we can make something of a difference. The next book I have is more of a treatment of people type of a story, and this is The Organ Thieves, The Shocking Story of the First Heart Transplant in the Segregated South by Chip Jones. You could also run with like The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks or something in this direction, but I wanted to mention this one because I don't think it has gotten as much hype as The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks has. To be clear here, this is the story of the first heart transplant in the segregated South. It is not the story of Bruce Tucker, who is the unwitting donor in this situation. A lot of people who have reviewed this book were upset because I think they were expecting, like in The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, this to be a tribute to Bruce Tucker's life. It is not that. It very much is the story of the heart transplant itself. It dives into things like the treatment of Black people within the medical community, and it dives into some of the reasons that this actually happened, and because of that they look a lot at the surgeons' lives, because you really have to look at them to see how ego played a role. But a lot of it is specifically how when a Black man comes into an ER without family, with alcohol in his breath, no matter how that happened, they just assume he's homeless and nobody cares about him, is kind of what this boiled down to. And for that reason, I think you could use it for treatment quite well. And I mean, I liked this book. I think I gave it something like 4.5 stars. I don't remember, but I really enjoyed my time with it. I found it to be very interesting, and I found it to be good in terms of starting conversations. I have The Emperor of All Maladies, a biography of cancer by Siddhartha Mukherjee. This is kind of the story of cancer, yes, but past cancer treatment, present cancer treatment, and the future of cancer treatment. So I think it fits pretty well in here. This is a very long book, and it's not always a pleasant book to read because it is hard. It's hard to read about cancer, which is this horrifyingly debilitating disease that impacts so many lives. But I learned so much about it, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I definitely recommend this one. I think in terms of treatment, particularly if you want to go in the direction of treatment of people, you could do something like An Indigenous People's History of the United States. That might be a good one because I know that, I think it's in November, there is some kind of Indigenous peoples like readathon or a push to read more about Indigenous people. I'm not entirely clear on what it is, but if you want something to overlap, I do recommend that one. I thought it was an interesting read. Is it a perfect read? No. But I do think it helps put things into context, and it corrects some misconceptions of American history. I also think anything by Isabel Wilkerson could work. Cast or The Warmth of Other Suns. Both of those are great options for this as well. The Warmth of Other Suns is a little bit on the long side, but because it is kind of narrative in tone, it's a pretty quick read. And then Cast is shorter, but it has less of that narrative style. It's more of a sociological look, I guess, at a caste system in the United States versus The Warmth of Other Suns, which is largely based on the stories of Black people who migrated from the South to the North during the Great Migration. Okay, and that is my Nonfiction November TBR and some recommendations if you are still looking for things to read. If you already know what you're planning to read for Nonfiction November, go ahead and let me know some of them, one of them, whatever you're most excited about in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys are reading as well. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.